Anyone familiar with the paranormal most certainly has heard of Brad Steiger. A prolific author of nearly 200 books, Steiger has spent decades documenting the paranormal in all of its forms. He was one of the very first researchers to publish a book on people who go missing in our world's forests, over 3 decades before Paulides began publishing his Missing 411 books. He also published scores of books on UFOs and aliens. When it comes to alien stories, Steiger has pretty much heard everything, from the creepy to the downright bizarre. However, there is one case that stands out to him to this day, a case that he refers to as the most incredible case of abduction which he has ever encountered. Steiger noted that had the report not been attested to by a very matter-of-fact physician associated with one of the largest, most prestigious hospitals in the Midwest, he would have been extremely hesitant about sharing it with the public. Steiger made contact with a man he referred to as Dr. William through a correspondent who had taken a course in medicine with him. According to this correspondent, Mrs. E., William had not mentioned the experience during the several weeks' duration of the course, but one day after a class session, he had mentioned it over a cup of coffee. According to William, the occurrence took place in a hospital in Hawaii in 1968. At the time, William was about 19 years old, serving in the medical corps and assigned to the military section of the hospital. Steiger chose not to mention the name of the hospital in Hawaii. William, a quiet, sincere man, wished to continue his medical career and felt his association with such an account would only work to hurt his reputation as a doctor. For that reason, Steiger felt it would be inappropriate to reveal William's full name. According to William, the incident happened one night while he was doing his rounds, checking on patients. He remembered one patient who was in traction and totally unable to move, with pins through his tibia and femurs, had told him that he would be gone that night for 1 hour to join his friends in a UFO. Further, the patient said that William could accompany him if he wanted to. William found the comment to be somewhat comical and told the patient jokingly that he would be unable to join him that night as he would be busy. Brushing it off, William continued with his checks. Later, though, at bed check, true to his word, the patient had disappeared, leaving the metal pins on the bed. William notified the military police, and an extensive search of the hospital and the surrounding grounds was carried out, but failed to produce any trace of the medically immobile man. William remembered that the man was about 60 years old and a veteran of World War II. He was kind of a hippie who had ended up in the hospital after dropping acid and walking out into traffic, resulting in him getting hit by a semi-truck and breaking his legs in several places. He had a Spanish-sounding name, something like Espinia. He had bushy eyebrows, shoulder-length blondish hair, very large eyes, a round face, and a flattened nose. He stood about 5'6" and was a bit chubby. William remembered that Espinia was always talking about his weird techniques for medication and his desire for peace, love, brotherhood, and ending the Vietnam War, which was escalating at the time. Espinia spoke with a strange accent that William could not place. Interestingly, William noted that Espinia always seemed to have marijuana, or at least he seemed to be high a lot. He and the rest of the staff could not figure out how he was getting it. He had a few hippie friends who would visit him, but they were always searched prior to entering his room. The night he disappeared, I was working the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. When I made the bed check, Espinia told me that he would be gone for about an hour, and he reminded me that I could come along if I wanted to. I chuckled and walked on to see about the rest of the patients. Espinia was in a 6-man room, but that night he was alone. My post was almost right across from his room. When I sat at my desk, I could survey the entire corridor. No one could get on or off the floor without my seeing them, and of course, there were nurses, doctors, interns, and MPs walking around. When I checked Espinia's room a bit later, maybe out of curiosity, he was gone. The traction weights were hanging there, the pins were on the bed, but Espinia was gone. I put out an alarm, and MPs and other hospital personnel searched the place thoroughly. Espinia was gone. No one had seen anything. Well, some people did. William spoke to some patients, and while they didn't see Espinia get up and leave, they did notice something strange that night, a light. Some other patients said that they had seen a bright light, a very bright light, on that side of the building, and that would have been just before Espinia's disappearance. Steiger asked if it would be possible for Espinia to remove the pins himself and slip out somehow. A man would faint from the pain if he tried to pull those pins out. I mean, this guy was laying in that bed with both legs up, his femurs broken. Think of the terrible pain of trying to crawl under such conditions. It would be impossible. William claims that the staff and military police searched the area for an hour with no luck. Then it happened. After searching the hospital, even the grounds, for an hour, somebody looked into Espinia's room, and there he was again, back in traction, pins in place. The patient had been gone for 1 hour. He told his interrogators that he had been with his friends. Every pin was in its place. A doctor on the floor said that while it might be possible for a man to pull the pins out, it would be impossible for anyone to shove them back in by himself. According to William, Espinia was interrogated for hours by 4 MPs, but was reluctant to divulge much of anything beyond that he had been with his friends. Eventually the MPs grew tired and left. That is when William found himself alone with Espinia, who told him something strange. When they finally left him, he looked at me and told me that I could have come along with him, but his friends knew that I didn't really believe in them. He said that he and his friends had spent a delightful hour flying over the Hawaiian Islands and chatting about metaphysics. When I chastised him for having caused such a disturbance in the hospital, Espinia became a bit sheepish and said that the next time he went flying with his friends, he would leave his body there and just go with them in his mind. Steiger claims that the doctor swears up and down the incident did happen, that a man who shouldn't have been able to leave his room had somehow disappeared for at least an hour just after a strange light was observed, and while the staff and military officials searched the grounds, he somehow managed to, after the hour was up, return and put his pins back in place without anyone seeing him.